Now let's move on to education. And of course, education is based on worldview, the way that the information is put forth. You've heard of Eurocentrism, Afrocentrism, secularism. I mean, it's all about how the information is put forth. It's based on worldview. Phil Fernandez notes that C.S. Lewis, in his prophetic work, The Abolition of Man, critiqued an English textbook written in the 1940s, which was designed for school children. Lewis found that more than English was being taught in this book, for the authors rejected objective truth and traditional values and proclaimed a type of moral relativism. Lewis expressed concerns for two reasons. First, the children who read the textbook would be easy prey to its false teachings. Second, this would lead to a culture built on moral relativism and the rejection of objective truth, something that, according to Lewis, has not existed in the history of mankind. And so you see the point. Within a book about grammar, there's a worldview behind it. There's a worldview behind something as apparently worldview-less as teaching grammar. There was something behind it. So now, there's a claim out there that atheists, polls and studies show atheists are smarter than the average bear. And, you know, when you run across that sort of research, you always want to think of it in terms of a social scientist. You don't want to just look at the conclusions. You want to look at what questions were asked, how they were asked, to whom they were asked, what the responses were. And that's how you really figure out what's underlying the conclusion. Now, you know, I work with tons of engineers, and there's a stereotype of them that's very true. I mean, they're technically brilliant people. But on the common sense level, man, so I mean, you know, there's categories, let's say, of smart. You can be very, very, very smart in something, and elsewhere, yeah, forget about it. So, for instance, you can be very smart, but if you lock your mind, your thinking, inside a materialist box, you have disadvantages, because you're restricting your thinking to this little box of material possibilities, and you're not allowing it out. So that's your disadvantage right then and there. And so why is it that, if it's true, so many atheists are smart? Well, look at our education system is basically an atheist catechism, wherein reference to God is virtually illegal. If there is reference to God, it's in the negative. And so basically all the subjects are put forth without any reference to God whatsoever. So, yeah, by the time you get to college and graduate, like, well, obviously God is just irrelevant. I mean, no function in history or science or anything. We just do it all ourselves. And this brings me to mention something that just burns me up, which is atheist activism on campus, on college campus, which there's a lot of it. And to me, I mean, that's like shooting dead fish with a bazooka in a barrel without water in it. I mean, you think about it, you have the youth, which are naturally rebellious. Okay, they're teeming with hormones, shall we say. They just left mommy's apron strings. They're put in co-ed situations, and along come the atheists and say, oh, this Judeo-Christian morality, there's no such thing, you know. It's all relative. Whoa, really? Well, it's, if you want me to put it in a brutally honest way, it's basically a modern-day version of temple prostitution, right? It's like you'll derive these certain pleasures from holding to our worldview. That's what it is. So let's jump to science. And I wonder if you might take a guess as to who wrote this. Surely the best way to construct the infrastructure of a bat's wing is not also the best way to build a whale's flipper. Such anatomical peculiarities make no sense if the structures were uniquely engineered and unrelated. A more likely explanation is that all mammals descend from a common ancestor. The historical constraints of this retrofitting are evident in anatomical imperfections. For example, the human knee joint and spine were derived from ancestral structures that supported four-legged animals, or four-legged mammals. almost none of us will reach old age without experiencing knee or back problems. If these structures had first taken form specifically to support our bipedal posture, we would expect them to be less subject to injury. Incidentally, I'm reading that as I have to sit down with my knee hurts and I have to stand up when my back hurts, so. But, you know, I wonder if you might imagine who might have written that. It actually comes from a college-level biology textbook called Biology from Neil Campbell and Jane Reese. I mean, this is basically, the point being, atheism isn't being smuggled into the classroom through the back door. It's being brought in right from the front door, right in the textbook that you have to purchase for class. This is college-level biology, and there's an anti-creationist argument right within the text. And it's such a poor argument, by the way. I mean, you know what this means? It means I'm going to sue the company that claims to have manufactured my vehicle because they claim that they designed it, but I'm constantly shelling out money for repairs, right? I mean, in essence, the point is they're calling into question the efficacy of the creator. It's like this obviously wasn't created because it has problems. But firstly, you really have to know the purpose of the thing in order to determine whether it's properly engineered or not. For example, you ask any engineer about what they call parts that are designed to wear out, and engineers do that. So you might look at a part and say, look at it, it's falling apart. It's like, yes, but we designed it to wear out. I mean, it's supposed to do that. So this is just, again, the point is to consider what's behind what's being put forth, how it's being put forth, what's the message behind it, what's the worldview behind it. And the issue here is that Darwinism is turned by some into a worldview. Okay, you have a theory that is supposed to be about biology, but people turn it into a worldview, and all of a sudden, everything they see is through these lenses, and so they concoct Darwinian stories, you know. How many times have you seen that where someone's trying to explain some biological function and you realize, wait a minute, you're just telling me a story. That's all you're really doing. You're concocting a Darwinian-era tall tale, including cryptozoological animals like the common ancestor. As an example of reconstructions, okay, now this is from a movie poster, Planet of the Apes. You see the whites in the eyes and the small nose. Our nose is made of cartilage. I mean, they don't fossilize, so this was an excellent example because they're trying to make this ape look human for the movie. But here's actual reconstructions of our supposed ancestors, and all of them have these sort of tapered down noses, the whites in the eyes, which chimps don't have, to make them look like what the theory says they're supposed to be moving towards. Here's the skeleton of Lucy, and you see, I mean, virtually no hands whatsoever, certainly no feet, and not much of anything else there. That's the actual find. That's the actual fossil. And then when we look at the reconstruction, there's the whole being, you know, which, I mean, this thing looks so weird to me anyway. It kind of looks like a platypus. But you see, there's an entire reconstruction because the theory says it should have looked like this, even if it has no hands and feet. Look at these very human feet. The skeleton the find didn't have any whatsoever. Likewise with the hands, reconstructed to appear more human. So the point being, you have a theory or a worldview interpreting the actual found evidence, and then through reconstructions or paintings or whatever, you can make them look however you want. Next one here is, oh, there's the happy couple. I mean, walking in the snow, they must be outside here somewhere. Now, what about Gigantoraptor? Okay, it's a dinosaur illustrated with feathers. And here's what a paper said. Gigantoraptor had long arms, bird-like legs, a toothless jaw, and probably a beak. There are no clear signs as to whether it was feathered. However, judging from its close affinity with other dinosaurs known to have been feathered, Zhu Jing of the Institute of vertebrate paleontology and paleoanthropology, and Beijing speculates that it was. Here's Ambulaceta natans and then Pakicetus. And you can see if you think that they were a furry land-dwelling creature, then they were. If you think that they were swimming around, they were. I mean, it's up for interpretation. So Gigantoraptor has feathers in the reconstruction because, well, it's speculated that it did, even though the fossil find did not have them. And so here's another example. The top one's a drawing of the skeleton, what it probably looked like. The middle's the reconstruction, but the yellow portions in the bottom are what was actually found. So you find little bits and pieces, and then you construct it to look like what your theory says it should have looked like.